First, let's return to Labor's changes to the Future Fund, because they're not even trying to hide their contempt for the taxpayer, with plans to sink potentially billions into their Green left political priorities. Joining me now to discuss this, our Sky News business editor, Ross Greenwood. Well, you and I will both remember, I was in the Parliament at the time when the Future Fund was established in 2005. It was meant to strengthen our long-term financial position. And for almost 20 years, all credit to Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard, there's been bipartisanship on the fund. Now, I was shocked by today's move, Ross. What did you make of it?
Oh, look, to be honest, Peter, I was in the same camp, because it's all very well to sit there and say we're going to adjust the mandate for the times. But the reality is the Future Fund has sat there for all this time with the one mandate. And I've gone through it today and had a read of that mandate. And having been the chairman of investment committee of a superannuation fund, a big superannuation fund, I kind of understand how these things work. And the idea is that this fund is supposed to, at its very core, basically produce a return of between 4.5% and 5.5% above inflation. And so that's the key. So over the years, it's built up. Now, the reality is it's there for public servants' pensions in the future. And the Treasurer today did say he's not going to actually touch it or tap the fund for another 8 years. So it's going to continue to grow. Now, by that time, many of those public servants will grow old enough and they will need to start to take money out of this fund. But the reality is you want to build it up to the maximum that you possibly can. But there's another number I want to show you today and share with you, and that is a number of the amount of government debt that's on issue right now, according to the Australian Office of Financial Management. So again, I checked this today. That number, as we sit here, is $949.3 billion of government debt on issue. So it is precipitously close to $1 trillion that the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, has continued to lambast the coalition over in regards to the debt that they inherited when the Labor Party took office. So the Labor Party itself now is very close to $1 trillion worth of debt. So if the government right now wants to invest more money and keep on spending, and remember this is already one of the highest taxing governments in history, it needs to find other ways to try and set its agenda. What would be easier than superannuation funds, and particularly the government-controlled superannuation fund, the Future Fund, to actually tell it that it should be investing in, say, more housing. Remember the government's promise, 1.2 million homes. It's not going to build those. Remember also that it needs more green energy, because we've got a shortage of energy in this country and we'll have an ongoing shortage of energy. Wants more wind farms, more solar farms, presumably. But, you know, the fact is, if these were such good investments, guess what? The Future Fund would already be investing in them, and in some cases already has, but that is its independent decision, not dictated to by the Treasurer saying, I think you should look here.
Peta Costello makes that very point. He says, you know, you don't change something to keep doing what it's already doing. You change it to force it to do something different. And in this case, it's political priorities that you quite rightly say, if the fund thought they stacked up, if they were in that band of rate of return, they'd already be investing in them. The sheer fact that they are not means that they don't stack up. So they'll be forcing the fund to go down this path. And now with Greg Combet at the helm, he was the climate change minister. He loved the carbon tax. He loved the Rudd scheme. I mean, this is manna to heaven.
Well, remember that he's not just only the former climate change and energy efficiency minister, right, in the Gillard government, but he was also the chair of the government's net zero economy agency. So when he comes out and says, look, we think this is all absolutely fine, what do you reckon he's talking about? So this is where, again, a government agency that is supposed to be independent is all of a sudden being pushed around by the government of the day, just changing the levers. You can see it with the Reserve Bank right now. Of course, the Reserve Bank was there to basically fight inflation, and that is what it largely has done. This government has come in. Jim Chalmers said, oh, by the way, not just inflation, but also make certain that everybody keeps their jobs. In other words, put pressure on interest rates to be cut. And this, of course, you can see the jawboning of the Reserve Bank. You should be cutting rates. It's coming down. Cut the rates. And the Reserve Bank is, to its absolute credit, standing firm and saying, no, we're going to address the inflation issue, because if that gets out of hand long term, that's going to be a big problem. Well, on the other hand, now you've got the Future Fund. They're saying, listen, you should invest in all these areas as a priority. And, me as an ordinary person says, well, how do we know that that is a priority to actually fulfil the aims of achieving those returns? You simply don't. And remember, we already have a Clean Energy Finance Corporation that's handing out billions of dollars to all sorts of schemes in this area. So now, why do we need another thing which is set up to create pensions to do precisely the same thing?
Because they need the money. The problem is, Costello makes the point today, all these other green funds we've got are not getting anywhere near the returns as the Future Fund is getting. And its inaugural chairman, the former banker David Marray, he says that these changes are boondoggle budgeting. So he's scathing, Costello's scathing. People at home might be saying, well, OK, Peter, but it's there just to pay public service pensions. Yes, it is, and military pensions. But we are on the hook for those as taxpayers. So we have to pay for them. And if we don't pay for them out of a well-performing future fund in 8, 10, 15 years' time, we're paying for them out of our underlying budget. So they're coming out of the budget that today is supposed to fund Medicare or roads or hospitals, all the other things we want to do. This meant, when it was established, that those liabilities, those superannuation liabilities, were taken care of, which when you're in government, as you would know, Ross, it's a great load off your mind to know that that big looming debt, just like your mortgage payment, that's taken care of, and you can spend what you've got on what you need today in the household or this week or next week, not 4 or 5 years down the track. That's the problem, and I think this is bastardry, and I think it's going to be an election issue.
And one last final thing for you, and this is something that Angus Taylor pointed out today. If this is a mandate over the Future Fund, then what's to prevent the government creating a similar mandate over your superannuation fund? $4 trillion in our super fund. The government suddenly says, well, hang on, we think you've got to prioritise these areas which we think are in the nation's interest. At the moment, if you're a super fund trustee, your mandate is to provide the best and most consistent retirement for individuals who are members of that fund. And this goes back to the whole issue of whose money is this? Remember when Paul Keating set up compulsory superannuation, it was you taking responsibility of your own retirement, because the government got out of that game because it didn't want the liabilities. And so it put it on you as an individual to take responsibility for your fund and your retirement. What you don't want is a government now coming back in and saying, actually, we're going to tell you where you can invest that money. That is a very slippery slope.
And that's why Labor do not want you to use your money out of your super fund for, say, a house deposit, because they want to use it on green projects. And I think that's going to come. That's where we're headed, Ross. We'll come back to that, I'm sure, again and again and again. Thanks for your time.